Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a genuinely fascinating piece of research by Oluyomi Oladavid. She uses a brilliant title that immediately challenges how we think about global development. Oliver Twist, foreign aid alone is not enough. For decades, the global community has poured immense resources into developing nations, yet the expected transformations often remain stubbornly out of reach. So today, we're going to dive into her data-driven analysis to understand exactly why that is, and much more importantly, how she proposes we fix it.
Okay, let's start by exploring that metaphor she uses right in the title. You know the classic Charles Dickens character, right? Oliver Twist holding up his little bowl and asking, "Please, sir, I want some more." Well, she uses this powerful imagery to describe a pretty outdated view in macroeconomic policy. There's this lingering assumption that developing nations simply need more and more money to grow, that the absolute only missing ingredient for economic prosperity is just a larger volume of cash. But is more aid automatically the answer? Her research loudly says no.
So where did this whole more money equals more growth idea even come from? She actually traces it all the way back to the post-World War II era. The traditional motivation for foreign aid stems from the incredible success of the Marshall Plan, which effectively helped revive a devastated Europe. Because that massive injection of funds worked like a charm there, a historical belief took root. The idea that simply dumping funds into any struggling region would guarantee a similar economic revival. But as she points out, applying a mid-20th century European solution to modern African economies overlooks immense structural differences.
Here's our roadmap for breaking down her research on West Africa. We're going to look at the Great Aid Debate, break down the actual types of aid, see exactly why current efforts fall short, tackle elite capture, and outline a better way forward.
All right, Section 1. The Great Aid Debate.
Right up front, she acknowledges the two massive opposing camps in this arena. On one side, you've got the pro-aid proponents, championed by figures like Professor Jeffrey Sachs, saying development assistance is absolutely vital for overcoming poverty traps. And then on the flip side, you have the anti-aid arguments from scholars like William Easterly and Dambisa Moyo. They argue that aid actually does more harm than good by stifling local markets and fostering dependency. It's a huge debate. But rather than just picking a team, she does something unexpected. She carves out her own highly nuanced, data-driven path.
Which brings us to Section 2, breaking down the aid. Now here is an absolute game changer in her approach. Historically, researchers looked at aid as just one giant lump sum, but she doesn't treat aid as a monolith. Instead, she rigorously analyzes these 7 distinct, disaggregated categories. We're talking agriculture, communication, industrial engineering, education, health, and food security. By breaking the data down into these specific components, she's able to examine their exact impact on the macroeconomic environment and social welfare in West Africa. It's just a much smarter, more precise way to see what's actually working and what isn't.
Moving right along to Section 3. Why aid falls short.
Okay, get ready for a pretty grim, data-driven reality check. Despite the major justification for foreign aid being its potential to boost human development, she found decreasing returns to aid over time. Even worse, it had negligible effects on income per capita. Think about that for a second. Pouring in more money is literally having less and less impact on the actual day-to-day wealth of individuals in the sub-region. That Oliver Twist approach of just asking for more is definitively failing to translate into higher living standards for the average person.
So, what's going wrong here? Well, she proves that the environment receiving the aid totally dictates its success. When aid lands in an environment with favorable macroeconomic policy, it's effective. But, and this is a massive but, if local institutional quality and basic infrastructure are lacking, it contributes almost nothing. Basically, even if the high-level policy is perfectly fine, the on-the-ground infrastructure and institutions are failing to actually capitalize on that development assistance.
Let's dig into that failure with Section 4, Stopping Elite Capture. This brings us to a huge hurdle she identifies called elite capture. This happens when economic resources and development assistance get co-opted by corrupt local institutions or individuals, completely bypassing the everyday populations who actually need the help. She notes that sure, global donors have grown wiser to these corrupt practices, but it's just not enough. She argues that establishing a firm institutional arrangement specifically designed to check this elite capture is long overdue. Otherwise, aid will never be administered based on its comparative advantage.
And beyond just the corruption, her findings highlight some major warning signs.
She points out severe structural deficiencies actively holding back economic development in West Africa. Specifically, she notes limited intra-regional interaction, meaning neighboring countries just aren't trading enough with each other, and widespread financial exclusion. When everyday people are kept completely out of the banking system, foreign aid literally is nowhere productive to flow once it arrives. It's just stuck.
Finally, Section 5, a better way forward.
The good news is, she doesn't just point out the flaws. As African countries map out frameworks for the post-2015 Sustainable Development Goals and the AU Agenda 2063, she offers this super clear, structured path to systematically redesign official development assistance. 1. Aid must actively work to improve local macroeconomic policies. 2. It needs to enhance intra-regional trade structures so wealth actually circulates locally. And 3. It must promote an inclusive financial system. It's all about building an engine that can actually use the fuel being poured into it rather than just endlessly spilling fuel on the ground.
Let's zoom in on that last point about financial inclusion. To skip the heavy economic jargon, she highlights two incredible real-world benefits. First, an inclusive financial system fosters the development of product markets, giving people a place to actually buy, sell, and grow local businesses. Second, it enables what economists call expenditure smoothing, basically creating a rainy day safety net. This way, everyday folks can save, borrow, and weather unexpected economic shocks without falling into absolute poverty.
As she concludes her paper, she makes a really strong argument for where the academic and development communities need to go next. She urges that we have to keep zooming in. Instead of always looking at the big macroeconomic picture, she supports micro-level impact evaluation studies. We need to take those disaggregated aid components, like health or agriculture, and rigorously evaluate exactly how they are functioning right down at the local recipient community level. So this research really forces us to confront a hard truth. The era of just throwing money at a problem and hoping for the best is totally over. Oluyomi Oladavid has shown us exactly why aid falls short, and precisely what structural, institutional, and financial changes are required to actually make it work. So the question I want to leave you with today is this: are global donors and policymakers finally ready to listen to her data, build real safeguards against elite capture, and permanently abandon the Oliver Twist approach to foreign aid? Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to keep questioning the structures behind the systems we take for granted.